think Mick is with us now. I'm still figuring out all the Google Meet features. It's a whole heck of a lot of fun. All right. Hello, Mick. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Great. How you doing?
Good, thank you.
Wonderful.
How's everybody doing?
Sorry?
I'm wondering how everybody's doing.
How's everyone doing?
Good. Staying warm inside.
Excellent. I have the chat going, so people can post questions in the chat, or you can raise a hand, and we will. You can ask your question out loud as we go. But I guess maybe we'll just give a few more minutes to see if a few more people join us, and then we'll go from there. If that works for everyone. Excellent. Emil hears us. Emil is a high school student. He lives around Montreal, and he likes watching airplanes and trains and such. So we're happy to have Emil with us. I got to meet Emil when I went to Montreal last weekend with Flight Spotter John for our streams that got interrupted by extreme weather. We got some more people coming in here. All right, so yeah, just so everybody knows, this is being recorded for limited sharing with channel members only for the next week or so, for those who couldn't make it tonight, and then we'll remove it from the web. So just be advised, if you do not want your face seen by any other members beyond the meeting, then I recommend you keep the camera off and use the chat feature if you want to ask any questions. Otherwise, yeah, feel free to jump in. I'll have a few questions myself to get the ball rolling. Just a few guidelines. Okay, we'll get your question in a minute, Brittany. A few guidelines. Just try to keep everything respectful. I want to be very respectful of Mick's time. It's very nice for him to join us. He did not have to do that, but it makes me very happy to know that there are people in the industry who are interested in, making people more informed. I think that's kind of what my channel is all about. It's about trying to promote positivity in aviation in all forms, to show that Canada and Toronto has some really cool things going on. And it's one of the reasons I love going to the airport and doing what I do, and being able to meet the people that I meet and share the things that we get to share, because I think aviation is fantastic in all its aspects. I see we have Tony here, who retired recently as a mechanic for Air Canada. So we have lots of different people from all different areas of the industry and out of the industry who are just enthusiasts who like to be a part of this. So just a couple quick ground rules before we get rolling. I'll put them in the chat periodically, but yeah, keep things respectful and appropriate, and try to stay on topic, unless you really want to know how Mick trims his beard so wonderfully. I mean, you're welcome to throw that in there if we get to it. Try to keep your questions to one question at a time. I'm going to be as fair as possible and try to let everybody have a chance to speak. Stay on topic, raise your hand so we know that you want to talk, and yeah, try to be patient, as we might not get to every single question, but we will do our best. And then Mick can just, whatever Mick has to go, feel free to just take off. All right. Now that that is out of the way, I guess what I want to know is, my first question for you, Mick, is what attracted you to the idea of being an air traffic controller in the first place? Because I think it's a pretty cool job, but what got you into it?
I'm going to say it's the second coolest job in the world. I'd much rather be flying at 40,000 feet. That was always the dream when I was a young lad, and unfortunately didn't really play the school game very well, so I didn't stick in as much as I would have liked to have done, in hindsight, obviously, being 2020. I went into the world of IT out of college because everybody was doing that in the late 90s, so I just kind of followed the herd blindly, and then realized that I hated my life. 40 hours a week being on call doing IT, that wasn't the thing that gelled for me, and I've always loved aviation. And I remember saying to my wife at the time, I said, I'm just going to apply, and the worst they can say is no. we'll see where it goes. She didn't really want me to apply because we settled down in life. We just got a mortgage, just got getting married, and she didn't know where it would lead, and she obviously didn't realize it would lead to 3 different continents, 3 countries. That was definitely not on the cards, but it did. So yeah, it's a great job. I love it from a tower perspective because I like the windows. I like to watch the airplanes as much as I'd love a go in radar and moving dots around a screen. It doesn't seem quite as enjoyable as watching the planes and the weather come and go. But yeah, second best job in the world. It's been a fantastic career for the last 19 years. So highly recommend it to anybody to give it a go.
I can definitely second your comment on the windows. I got a chance to visit the terminal area control and the tower earlier last year, and I mean, while it was cool, Alex, who works in arrivals and departures, kind of showed us around, and we got to see the operations were fantastic. I need to put the headset on and see the dots, but once we got up the tower, it could see. I think I got to watch Lufthansa A350 take off, and it was just a spectacular view. I mean, that would be cool.
Yeah.
Definitely cool office window. And it's not the back of an alley in downtown Toronto for sure.
It doesn't get boring. So I don't know what it is, but still after 19 years of being in a tower, I watch Emirates take off, or whoever's going 12, 13, 14 hours and think that thing is not touching down on Earth until I go home, sleep, come back to work, and it'll be touching down somewhere else in the world. I just find that fascinating.
I think a lot of us do as well. Find just the idea of that's why I like airports. I always go hours before my flight because you just look out the window and you wonder where is this going, where it's going to be. And our friend Silvio, who's the binge traveler on Instagram, took off to Taipei at the beginning of March break, and John and I had drove to Ottawa, slept, went and did a stream, came back, and he was still in the air. It was just mind-boggling how long some of these flights are. I guess I also wanted to know sort of where did you start in air traffic control? Because I know you mentioned 3 different continents, and you had mentioned to me before some of the places you'd work, but maybe tell some of the people a little bit about what got you to Toronto Tower specifically, and how did that come about?
Oh, I'm still asking that question, and the jury's still out on whether that was a good decision or not. But it's a different challenge for sure. Well, as you can tell from my accent, I'm not Canadian. I am from the UK, so I started my career in Nats. My first posting out of college was Heathrow Tower. So I started in the old Heathrow Tower when it was the little short one in the middle of the roundabout in the center between terminals 1 and 2 and 3. And then moved to the new control tower. Then I moved to the Middle East in 2009, went to Dubai Tower, was there for 9 years. And once that adventure got a little bit long in the tooth, we looked, or I say we, I like to think it was we as a family, but I looked, and Canada was on the cards. The only place that would take me was Toronto. So I took the chance and we jumped.
That's fascinating. I think Toronto seems like, because my wife was recently going through the process of attempting to be an air traffic controller. Unfortunately, didn't end up making it through the testing stage, which was quite intense. And Toronto Tower seems like the ultimate place that everybody wants to end up at. But I imagine different people have different areas of interest and things that, or is it more like what the testing skills put you into?
It all so when usually the rule of thumb is if you get employed by an ANSP, an air navigation service provider like NATS or Nav Canada or whoever, they typically never give you what you want. Right. So you're always trying to ask for the opposite in the hope that you'll actually get what you want. But they will post you where it's operationally required. You can bid to the bigger places. Usually it does benefit people to start smaller, although in my case I didn't. I was kind of thrown right into the fire. Heathrow has this agreement with the college that they take 2 students from every course will go to Heathrow. Those that aren't successful in the training, they are offered other units, similar to what we do here in Toronto. So Toronto is a beast, and it's not really, I mean, they were classed as a VFR tower, but it's not the same as Oshawa or Hamilton or a Boundary Bay, some really busy VFR circuit schools, etc. Like I couldn't work that. I haven't done that since my college days. I wouldn't have a clue how to integrate a VFR circuit into anything, to be quite frank. So I'm very niche in my skill set. 19 years in, you kind of get old and crusty. Although I may not look it, I am on the inside. But yeah, I mean, I picked Toronto. Toronto was, I would have loved Vancouver because I would love the mountains and the ocean, and not the cost of living, but the cost of living here is now ridiculous anyway. But I like the challenge. We've got like someone in the chat who says that Emil says, yeah, we're on the 33s today. Like any day of the week, you could be on something weird. I've had shifts at the tower in winter where we've been on every single operation. And so I'd never done winter operations before. I'd never done snow plow, snow clearing, de-icing of any sort of magnitude that we do here. So I was like, I want a challenge, and I got one.
That's really, I think that's a question a lot of people ask about the different operations too. And Brittany mentioned in the chat earlier is what are some of the reasons? And I got a little insight of this when I did my tour with Alex and the whole idea of offloading. But Brittany wants to know why do they send some to the other side when they're doing a lot of, let's say, all arrivals, or sorry, my kid is singing in the background. They're doing all 2-4 left arrivals, and then what makes a plane go to 2-3 when it's or sometimes they'll depart on I've seen things where Air India, for instance, went and departed on 0-5 when they were all departing on 6 right one day. So I guess what are some of the factors that go into those types of decisions?
So I'll speak to the arrivals first. So basically, what we do as in conjunction with basically our system capacity within the FIR. So everything from the high sectors to the low sectors to terminal, which is what Alex Fisher does, and then to the tower, based on what our capacity is at the airport and their capacity to handle planes coming into the bedposts, we will declare an arrival rate. So that arrival rate is typically different in a land one, depart one, we call it. So we land one runway, we depart the other. Very simple operation. Versus a dual operation, which is mixed mode on 2 runways, which you'll see fairly frequently in an evening, to the triple operation, which is using both 6 right, 6 left, and 5. So all those demand the different arrival capacity that we can do at an airport. So what we typically do is the airlines don't like us declaring a rate for one runway. They know we have more tarmac, and they like to push the boundaries of what we can do. So we would do minimums on the landing runway, be it 6 right, 2-4 left, that we usually use at the minute for various tactical reasons. And then we will offload arrivals when we have spikes in traffic that we can't meet the demand with just one runway. So usually I would say we're doing 15 miles in trail on the offloads most nights. So on the departure runway, you'll have an arrival every 5 minutes. It's roughly what we'll do. The choosing of that particular aircraft is based on the bedpost it comes in at. So Ling is the bedpost to the south, which is coming in over Niagara. Typically, they will not go to the north runway because it's just harder to integrate for terminal, because they'll have to bring them over the field and onto the north downwind. It's not as efficient for them for vectoring. We'll take a lot of the stuff coming in over Boxham, which is from Bruce Peninsula, Lake Huron kind of area, or from the east. And it'll be wake turbulence related, or it'll be where they're parking on the airfield. So sometimes if you get the chart rights and the BizJets parking at Signature up on Kilo at the north end, it's much easier for our operation just to land them up there, and then they don't have to taxi through everybody and cross an active runway to get to where they need to be. So we'll tactically do that. If there is a wake turbulence advantage, we have 7 categories of wake turbulence on approach, all from the super down to the really low G category, which is like your citations and your caravans, etc. If we offload those, it means we need less space in front of them on the dedicated arrival runway.
That's very cool. So I guess I'm imagining, the heavies often are the ones that get offloaded more because they would require a little bit more spacing in integrating them into the rapid arrivals.
If the heavy is not surrounded by other heavies, yeah, usually the heavy will get offloaded.
Right.
But if you got a bunch of heavies all coming in, you'll put them all on the main runway, and you'll offload the little guy.
That makes sense. Yeah, I think the different operations is fun. It makes Toronto Pearson a challenging airport to be a plane spotter at, because it's kind of anybody's guess as to what's going to happen in the next 20 minutes.
Well, you've asked me before which runways the Lufthansa landing on. I'm like, I don't know, honestly. Until the runway gets allocated 60 miles out.
Right.
That's when the decision's made. Obviously the ATIS is broadcasting the dedicated arrival runway, but certainly the Lufthansa, the 47-8 may get offloaded. So if it's a heavy or a light type aircraft, there's a good chance that I'm not going to have a clue where they're going until it pops up on my screen. And it only pops up on my screen in the tower at a 26-mile range.
Right. Which is fair. Sometimes we get lucky though, and it's one of those things where you can't catch them all. And with a stream, we have to just set up in one spot and just, if it goes to the other side, some people in the chat like to yell and say, why aren't you over here? Like we got to pick a spot that's going to make a good show.
Absolutely.
Right?
The departures are a totally different mindset. It's more to do with aircraft performance than it is to do with anything else. So quite often, you mentioned Air India, they want 5 or 23 because it's a longer runway.
Right.
Often
they have to carry a lot more fuel because they're going far.
It's that you'll often see 15 left or 3-3 right used for the ad hoc one-off Air Canada to Air Canada 6-2 or Air Canada 1 going to Tokyo or Seoul or whatever.
Yeah.
They'll take that runway even though it's shorter than 23 because of there's some obstructions a bit off the end. There's some masts about 5 miles off the end. So they do all their engine out takeoff performance calculations. And
interesting.
And obviously they want to load it to the gunnels, right? So they take off weight, they lose revenue, so they try and put as much on that thing as possible and make our lives as difficult as possible.
I think what I learned too over the last little while is how complex the industry actually is, and everybody has a stake. Like the airlines want this because of cost, performance, revenue, and they have their numbers, and then there's safety, performance, and then there's other such efficiency things, and it's very fascinating. Dave wants to know. And obviously, any question we ask that you can't answer, just feel free to just say, like, I'm not, it's proprietary, I can't answer this.
Yeah.
Dave wants to know if there is currently a shortage of Nav Canada controllers. I know that's in the media a lot. I've seen it on some US streams where people are blasting Canada because it affects LA because of Canadian air traffic or something of that line. So if so, does that result in a lot of overtime for current staff?
Yes.
All right.
We have. This is an international problem. The problem was we've always struggled to maintain staffing,
right.
And then COVID compounded the problem. So the problem in COVID is we didn't have. I mean, you all probably know we went down from 1,500 planes a day to at one point we were 200 planes a day.
Right.
And you can't possibly train somebody in a live operation for 1,500 planes a day when there is literally no complication or complexity on the airfield. So there was no training benefit. What ended up doing is they laid off trainees. They moved trainees to other towers because the flight schools didn't shut down. So they needed people in Kitchener, Hamilton, Oshawa, etc. So they all got ferried off there and we never got them back. So the training train stopped, but the retirement train continued. So you see how those two have opposing, and but it's the same. You look at the FAA; they're all screaming about employing 1,500 controllers this year, or yada yada yada. Everybody's in the same boat.
Yeah,
we have delays down south. If any of you went down south this winter, for some summer heat, we ran a lot of delays, and it was all down to en route stuff with the FAA and their staffing.
Wow.
So I'm not throwing them under the bus. We're all under the same bus.
Oh, for sure. That's Tony mentioned. It seems like shortages in all sectors of aviation.
Oh, it's wild. And the irony is one day the tower will be staffed, and terminal won't, or it'll be an en route in the FIR that isn't staffed, and we have to put in restrictions. It's just the nature of the beast, and we're trying, like everybody else, NATS, NAV Canada, any other ANS is trying their damnedest to get more trainees through the system and fix the problem.
Right. No, I appreciate that. Johnny wants to know how many controllers are there on the tower right now, like the total number of controllers, and how many work typically during the day at any one time.
So typically we'll try and staff 10 per shift as best we can. We have 5 positions plus a supervisor in the tower. So that's if we're not running a triple, which we rarely do anymore. But you'll have North Tower, South Tower, 2 grounds, clearance, and supervisor. As soon as that degrades, we end up with combining the tower. So you'll hear the same voice doing 2-4 left as doing 2-3. Less than ideal, but that is something we've gotten used to. Yeah. So, and then we'll try and run, depending on the day, depends on your staffing, depends on how many breaks or how long your breaks are. Especially on bad days, like today on the 33s is very mentally intensive when you're in position. There's a lot that can go wrong.
Yeah, let's chat about the 33s actually, because that's something
right.
that we don't. We'll get it over with because I know it's a bit of a sore spot. But I know we don't see the 33s often, and a lot of people ask the question, especially during that crosswind video I took, when people just see one thing and go, "Hey, why aren't they just always on the 33s every time the wind changes?" And you mentioned to me some logistical stuff with that, so I'm sure people would be interested to know a little bit about what challenges the 33s or the 15s bring.
The 33s and 15s bring a much lower capacity for the airport. So first and foremost, we can't move as many airplanes, and the airport nor the airlines like that. We have very specific rules in our documentation. We have waivers. We have things we can work around in terms of crosswind limits that we're allowed to play with. At Pearson specifically, we can play with up to a 30-knot crosswind, including gusts. That's our maximum. So if it's 330 at 25, gusting 32, which it's around that today, then we're on the 33s. If it was gusting 29, if it was gusting 30 or consistently 30, we'd be on the 2s or the 0s, depending on what's going on. So we stay with it as long as we can. And it's to do with the airport will call us in the tower and say, why are you on the 33s in a 28-knot wind? So it's capacity. It's also noise. We're a very noise sensitive airport. The people to the south of us don't like planes flying over them down Tobico way, and fair enough. But it happens. I think I can't remember the stat. We're only on them, I think, maybe 3% of the time over the year. So we try, and for us in the tower, it's incredibly complicated. There's a whole different set of rules. We have what we call OLSs, obstacle limitation surfaces. So there's an imaginary cone that comes out from the threshold of each of the runways at certain height per angle and meter and everything else. So you have tail height restrictions. So we end up not being able to use a lot of our taxiways. And especially today where we're de-icing as well, everybody has to cross 3-3 right. Everybody has to cross that runway to get into the CDF. Every arrival, because of some of the restrictions we're forced on at the minute, has to cross the departure runway up at Hotel in November. So the ground controllers are doing a 4-way, completely opposite crossing of all these airplanes at the same time. And you're trying to make sure everybody keeps moving. And it, anytime you're crossing an active runway, you're increasing the risk.
Oh, for sure.
Be it an acceptable risk, which it is, but it's still. If you imagine getting the mindset of a pilot who flies into Pearson every day and all they hear is ground say, cross 3-3 right, cross 3-3 left, cross 3-3 right. And then the day they're not allowed to do it, they just kind of trickle on, roll through and do it because we're humans. We do that, right? We get into habits.
Yeah.
So it's a lot more intensive.
And is there a sometimes I've done some spotting on the 3-3s once in a blue moon. I'll go up to Dairy Road and look down the runway, and it looks like there's a bit of a hail on the runway too. Like, is there visual challenges on that runway?
Doesn't look like it from the tower, but there is a massive hill right at Sierra. So you can have a 777 on the threshold of 15 left, a 777 on the threshold of 33 right. They won't see each other.
Wow.
Yeah. So
I think
you
we've all
can
seen enough Mayday episodes to know that that's not good.
correct. So and there has been documented. Excuse me. And there are reports out there. We've had runway incursions at November and Hotel, and a lot of the reason is one plane doesn't see the other plane. Like if you don't see the plane rolling down the runway, sometimes your brain suck it into carrying on going, thinking you have a crossing clearance, and you don't see it till it crests the hill. And that's a lot of the time we'll get some of the foreign carriers. One of our places to hold airplanes when they're waiting for a gate is 33 right short of Tango. It's kind of one of our, you'll hear us use that all the time. Gates not available, taxi Delta onto 33 right hold short Tango. The problem is you'll see them there with all their lights on, bells and whistles, strobes are on, landing lights on, everything is on so that they're visible because they're looking down a lit runway.
Right.
And the last thing they want to see is usually it's Eva coming the other way because he's also got a gate hold. So he'll come down 15 left short of Bravo 3, but all they see is this massive jet cresting the hill. So they want all their lights on, and some of them don't like to hold on there, which I completely understand.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
You mentioned the noise too, and people not liking the planes flying over in Etobicoke. I just don't understand those people. My in-laws, where my wife grew up, is at Young and Shepherd, and one of my favorite things is when we're over there in the backyard in the summer, and it's pretty much exactly where many of the planes turn to join the ILS for 24 left. It's like we always see the planes do a little turn, and it's I don't know. That's maybe I'm strange, but it's a lot of fun.
No, it works for me as well. Don't worry.
Yeah. Johnny asked here. As a pilot learning instruments now, oh, congratulations, Johnny. That's pretty cool. I noticed at the tower, while a plane is on short final, tower can give clearance to the second plane and trail to land already. Will that be a safety concern issuing the clearance so early?
So I know they do this in the States a lot. I believe, maybe Vancouver. I'm not sure. There's not many towers in Canada that have approval to issue multiple landing clearances.
Right.
We are one of them. There's specific criteria to which we issue it, and basically it's to do with the tower controller's best judgment and experience to say that what he sees in his picture right now, the spacing between the airplanes, the speed of both airplanes, what he's witnessed for the last however many minutes in position, that this scenario will work. What you'll often hear is we won't give a landing clearance if we think it's going to be tight, and we'll hold on to that landing clearance.
If you're like delay landing clearance, you'll probably get it within 2 miles or something. Right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I'll do other things to try, and I'll talk to the first guy and I'll be minimum time on the runway, or the second guy I'll try to slow down. The problem is if you slow down the second guy, you back him up into number 3, and then it starts to concertina. So you want to slow them down, but you don't want to slow them down too early.
Yeah.
And there's a whole, and sometimes it just doesn't work. And that's one of the skills we need to see in a controller when they're in training. And it's one of the things that certainly people that have never worked before, and this is their first tower, they find it hard to overshoot an airplane.
Right.
Like it's a mental, but it's this, they don't want to send a plane of 300 people around for a 20-minute circuit of Toronto.
Yeah.
And they think they can make it work, and there's a certain point where it's too late to send it around. So you kind of have to make that call sooner rather than later.
That sounds rather stressful. I do hear a lot because we put in ATC on our stream, and we often hear Porter 546 expedite getting off the runway. We got a heavy and 2 mile final, and
it's always Porter, right? It's always Porter.
It is.
No.
I didn't know if I'd ever heard it with Porter. I just threw that out there as a thing. But sometimes it looks like, because I will call ourselves the uneducated, even though we all have been studying and looking at aviation for a long time. But we don't work in the tower. So what looks like to us as a very tight spacing, like what is that like in the tower when you've got, because sometimes I've seen it where a plane literally just takes off the runway and the other one comes in, and I suppose there's room for error in there, and like what is a scenario in which that could go wrong, or has it, or I don't know if you can speak to that.
Yeah, those scenarios are never fun when you're doing departure versus arrival. We have, and you learn by experience. You know, a lot of it is you roll by a certain point, it should work based on what you've seen and observed, and it's very different when you're on the 2s to the 0s, as in 24 right versus 6 left. There's a lot more speed compression on final on 6 left and 5 because they have a tailwind all the way down until they get below 1,000 feet. So they're already screaming in over the marker.
Right.
You're also chasing the previous arrival into the exit, which they don't seem to like to do at any great speed, which would be helpful if they hit it fast and got off the runway, but they don't seem to like to do that. So within legal limits, you know, you're not looking for 2 sets of wheels on the runway. That's a go homeable offense if that happens. Which can happen. I mean, it shouldn't happen when we're not supposed to leave it that late, but there are times when it's very, very tight, and it's tighter than you would like. The biggest issue that you don't want, sometimes it's worse to put 2 planes back up in the air, right? Because then you end up in a piggyback.
Yeah.
You have the guy just airborne, and then you got the go around going up over the top of it that you're trying to give a turn to. They may not take the turn. I remember very vividly a Lufthansa didn't take a turn the one time, and they had a Georgian RJ back in the days that Georgian were flying RJs, wingtip to wingtip.
Wow.
And he wouldn't turn, and then you got wake turbulence and all this kind of stuff. So you can tell the plane to do something, but they're not always going to do it in a timely manner. So you kind of have to remember that A, there's a comp fail, very rare, but B, pilots are very busy in that phase of flight. So when you issue a turn and a heading, unless you say the words immediate or avoiding action, they're not going to turn on a dime. And we try and leave those. We try and leave those terms for when we really, really need it. But yeah, the other worst case scenario is having the departure abort the takeoff, and you've committed the guy to landing behind.
Right.
So that's the scenario you never want to get into. So yeah,
that was the only Mayday episode besides the Air France that was a Toronto based, where they did the I just forget the details there, but I think there was an aborted takeoff, and a plane behind was unaware of it, or the controller had assumed something because it disappeared from their screen. I don't remember all the details, but it seemed quite harrowing.
Yeah, that was not a good event. Yeah, I don't really know what to say other than what was in the report.
Yeah.
Some of our equipment reported that the aircraft was airborne. Obviously, it got very close to being airborne. I think it was 130 knots or something before it aborted.
Right.
But this goes to how busy the tower controller is when you're working in a combined environment, and you're looking at the threshold of 0.5 and you're looking at the threshold of 0.6 left, and they're 3 kilometers apart, right? Like it's a lot of everywhere you're looking around, and it's a skill that we have to teach the trainees all the time. Is you're never sat down in that position. You're stood up, your head's on a swivel.
For sure.
And we have all the bells and whistles that go off as well. We have something called RIMCAS, runway incursion monitoring and collision avoidance system. So it'll start beeping. It'll start beeping when it gets. We have a 2-stage alarm. It'll light up the targets to say there's a problem, and then when it's getting really tight, we'll start getting audible alarms to say you should be doing something.
Right. I can correct myself, but it wasn't a Mayday episode. It was a mentor pilot that I'm thinking of.
There you go.
And I it was cool because very rarely does he talk about Toronto, and he kind of went into the tower and actually showed the positions, and that was kind of my first look at, that's where they all stand and where
yeah. It's not always ideal. They don't architecturally design a tower for the 20-year lifespan or whatever it is, and think about airport growth and what that person's going to be doing in what position at what time.
Yeah, that building's been around a while.
Yeah, 98, I think it was opened.
Oh, well.
Yeah.
A couple of Terry had two questions here. Sorry if I'm saying that incorrectly. Do you have a favorite and least favorite aircraft as a controller? And about the I don't know what you can say about the Air France tail strike. The YouTube recording doesn't get any mention of the tail strike by the pilot to the ATC. Was there any runway inspection just after the go around?
Nobody knew about it in the tower.
Well,
Nobody knew that there was a tail strike. They knew he went around, but nobody saw the tail strike in position, and that speaks again to how busy the guys in the tower are. You're constantly flicking your eyes from one plane to another to another. You're not just eyeballing this one guy rolling out. I'm looking up the final approach. I'm looking at what's in the exit. I'm looking at what the inspection vehicle might be doing, or anything that's milling around my runway. And if I'm doing the other runway at the same time, I'm then turning around and worrying about that runway.
yeah.
So it's So the Air France is still on the ground in Toronto.
Yeah, I saw it today. Actually, yeah.
They keep moving it around, threatening to do something with it, but it seems to go back to the same place. So
maybe they'll park it next to the Antonov eventually.
Yeah, I assume they can't pressurize it. I think that's probably why they can't fly it home.
Right, that makes sense.
That would be what. Yeah, a little bit like the Japan Airlines donkeys years ago, that the pressure hull blew after years of fatigue from a tail strike. So
right. I guess they could fly it home at 9,000 feet the entire way, but that would be probably less than ideal.
I would have thought they would have already done that if that's what they were going to do. So we're as speculative in the tower as you are. I have no idea. We just watch it being moved so they can accommodate another Air Canada 777 in there, something or whatever. In terms of the other question, the favorite and the least favorite aircraft as a controller, it depends. As a controller, in terms of performance, I can't stand the 220s or the Embraer 175s or the Porter E195s. All these geared turbofan engines are so slow. They're super efficient, and that's great for them in their little bubble of one airplane. But you don't half come close to losing separation if you get too close with that. They're slow on departure is basically my problem. They get up and they do not go forward. Whereas I'll launch a Gulfstream or a 320, 330, 777, whatever. They're just so much faster that it's like Pac-Man on the radar. They just eat them up. And we have very noise sensitive SIDs, so you'll notice everything goes out to 3,600 feet before radar turns them on course. So everything's flying the same way. So if we get too close, less than 3 miles, then we've handed a loss of separation to the guys in terminal, and then we do paperwork and we go home. And we sit in the naughty corner and think about what we've done, and then we come back and we don't do it again the next time. Yeah, basically you go sit in the dunce corner, especially if you've done it just before the end of your shift, because what's the point? You worked your whole shift to do paperwork at the end. You might as well do that at the beginning and then go home. That's that's by the by, but they are really slow on departure. Beautiful. I've flown on a 220 as a passenger. It's a great airplane to fly on. On departure, don't like it. Give me a 777. 380 is great. Not on departure, but on arrival, because it flies so slowly. Right. That wing is so big that it just floats through the air. Like it's got such a great lift to weight ratio that it's just wild.
And what about as not as a controller, but as Mick, who likes airplanes?
Mick, who loves it. Mick has an Emirates A380 sat here, FYI. There you go. See, that's
on my shelf.
This one. Somebody made a comment about it in the chat earlier. This one was a gift from Dubai. All the controllers on duty signed it when I was leaving. So they signed that. They put my last transmission, which was to Air India Express or something. Express India. There you go. Hooked to some funky call signs in Dubai. But yeah, that's a nice reminder of the desert. I like the 350. I think it's a beautiful airplane. I'm a big Airbus fan. Maybe it's because I used to be European until we left the European Union.
That makes sense. I think I was defaulted probably to Boeing as a child, but with all of the recent things that we don't necessarily need to talk about, Airbus is seeming a lot more appealing.
Yeah, I've done many one of the fortunate things I got to do in my career is do many jump seat flights. So I've flown on the 47 up front and the 340, 600, 330s, 320s, 737s, 777s. They're all great. Just Airbus seems to have an edge when it comes to pilot experience up front. Like it's just, there you go. Ergonomics. Airbus ergonomics.
Emil, our friend from Montreal, wanted to know what the marker is. I guess for those who might not listen as much as we do.
It's another name for the final approach fix. So it depends on which runway. They're roughly between 3.8 and 5 miles from the threshold of the runway.
And Curex and Omtalk.
Yep. Yep. And I can't remember half of them until they say it.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, I always forget which ones they are. But yeah, Savos. What's the other one? I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, I couldn't tell you any of them for the 3.3s because I just don't hear them enough. But it's when 2.4 left seems to be right now the favorite landing runway. It's always like 170 Curex contact tower, 11835 or 1187, wherever it is.
So I'm going to throw a question to your guys in here.
Sure.
Ever since they relayed 2.4 right, 6 left, if you remember they ripped it up in 2023.
Yeah.
Oh, was it 22? No, 22. I can't remember. Anyway, they ripped the whole thing up. They slapped it back down, brand new, and now we land on the outer 2.4 left, 6 right, way more often, which our friends at the airport maintenance and electrical don't like at all. I want to know what your thoughts are on why you think we use it more now.
That's a good question. Anybody want to take a stab at that? I would just be guessing, but
it's a shorter runway, right? It's only 9,000 feet. It's nearly 700 foot shorter than 2.4 right. Air France doesn't like it for now 2 reasons.
Fair. Any thoughts? Let people take a minute.
You can throw it in the chat if you want. If you don't want to come on voice, it's fine.
Is it because you can say to take off on 2.4 right while you're landing in 2.4 left, and then 2.4 left you can park a few cars at the taxiway or park a few planes at the taxiway?
No, that's not the reason. That would be our triple operation. So you land 2.4 left, depart 2.4 right, and you're landing departing on 2.3 as well. So that's the triple operation. That's a highly efficient operation. It's a very, let me say, the reason does not help the airlines out. It helps the controllers out.
Got some guesses here, and these guesses are better than my guess would have been, which is like it's further away, so it has more room to. I don't know. Dave says landings on 2.3 and far up from the terminals.
Landings on 2.4, 2.3 end up far from the terminals. That is very true. It's a long taxi. Not the reason.
Your question was why 2.4 left as opposed to 2.4 right. If it's like a dual operation, why the outer shorter runway rather than? I would imagine it has something to do with taxiing and things you can do and movements that can take place so that the landing in aircraft is not interfering with like Charlie and Delta. But I honestly that would be just a guess. We also got I think that's Skittles. Good to see you, by the way. Better access to international terminals. I have no idea. I think we are stumped. So this is fascinating.
There you go. Interesting. I wondered if anybody might have a clue. Mike, you're actually a little closer to the point than you probably think you are. What we found, especially when running what we call a combined tower position, so one controller is doing 2.3 and 2.4 right, is we would have to hustle the plane. So both those runways we can do 2.5 mile spacing on approach. That's the minimum we can do. 2.5 miles. We can let it erode less if we can see them inside the marker, if we think it's going to work. So we might get it 2 miles. We might get something slightly around there. That's always going to be squeezy. But what we found is, I don't know if it's post-COVID, new pilots. We don't know what's causing it. Pilot performance is a bit of an issue. And they don't seem to hit Charlie 4, Charlie 2, or on the other end, Charlie 3 particularly quickly. And then they get into that melee of Charlie and Delta taxiways.
Right.
and some planes don't know where to go. So if you looked on a zoomed in map on Google Earth or whatever, you see where the runway lines are, the whole short lines. They're a decent chunk away from the runway on Charlie 4, but if they're still in there, I shouldn't be landing behind them or departing. There should be continuous movement into that exit. So what we found was it was labor intensive for the controller to be saying, keep moving, Charlie 4, Delta 4, don't stop, contact ground, blah, blah, blah. And they turn around and they've lost a departure hole. The offload's now closer than they wanted to be, and it became inefficient. If you look at the exits on 2-4 left, there's only one way to go. They don't get lost, and they hit them a heck of a lot quicker.
Right. I'm just doing a quick look here because actually I don't know if I can share a window. Can I share a window? I think I can share a window. Let's see if this. I don't know if this is going to pop up for everybody or not, but
there you go. I see it.
I see what you're saying, because I guess once they're on 2-4 left, it looks like if they exit at over here and they're already at 2-4 right, they're way out of the way and not having to do like weird maneuvering when they're still very close to the other arriving aircraft. Is that kind of
Yeah.
sort of right?
Yeah. Well, you look at where if you go north of 2-4 right there on Charlie 4, which is the high speed exit, all that mesh of taxiway, Charlie 4, Delta 4, Charlie, Delta.
Yeah, that is messy.
There's lines everywhere. If you do that at night with the green taxiway lights and all of them are lit up, it's like a Christmas tree. And certainly the foreign pilots, they don't know where to go.
Right.
You'll often get them stopping in the exit, and that's the last thing you want them to do. So we found that using the other runway, they just hit that exit a lot quicker. There's a lot less thinking for the controller to do, which frees up capacity to deal with everything else that's going on. So that's the reason we do it. The airport don't like it because that runway was never designed to have so much use.
Right.
Yeah. So my friend is one of the airfield electrical managers, and we keep blowing the bulbs every time we put it on versus the LEDs on 2-4 right. So I'm not her biggest friend right now.
Fair enough. But as a plane spotting enthusiast, which some of the people in the chat are, at least we now know that there's a better chance that we're going to see the 2-4 left action at the moment.
Yep. Go sit on that corner where 6 riders, and it's a great view.
It is, and although you're not allowed to stop there, unless you're a member of Airport Watch, they're allowed to park over at the side of the road there. So
there's always cars there.
Oh, I know, but they're
okay.
not allowed to be. There's always cars all over Convair as well, and then
I think I'm gonna mow children down on a weekend. I don't know what. Like, you go around there in the dark, and there's families out there, and it's just like it's chaos. I'm like, oh,
yeah.
All it needs is someone to run out into the road.
And people are, and that's something we talk about, in the community as well, is that there's a lot of people who just don't respect the fact that this is a working airport and people need to do things and get places, and there's running all over the place and leaving garbage around, and it's disappointing because eventually that's going to mean all of us can't be there at all, and they're going to be stricter with it. Because I know in Montreal they had issues with people having barbecues at the plane spotting park, and then of course attracting the birds, even though the signs say no food. People think, it doesn't apply to me, I'm going to just do whatever I want.
Yep.
It is unfortunate. That's cool. Yeah, the map is fascinating. I have another question actually before we get. There was a couple questions in the chat, but there are some times when I know there was a period of time when there was a sinkhole in one of the taxiways, and so you had to do most of the arrivals on the north and departures in the south, just because of certain things that Alex was mentioning about the way the taxiways work. But there are some times where it's unclear to people who just watch airplanes as to why all of a sudden everything's arriving on 2-3 and departing on the 2-4s or the 6s and 5s, depending on which way it's going. When for like a long period of time, I can expect south arrivals, north departures, and then there'll be a few days where it's just exclusively north arrivals and south departures. And wondering if there's anything that you're allowed to share. What are some of the factors that go into let's just switch everything up for the afternoon?
That's just what we feel like,
That's
it. Yeah, we just okay. Let's do this. No.
Somebody flips a coin.
Yeah,
and goes,
basically,
"All right,
yeah,
we're gonna do
yeah,
it."
yeah, yeah. No, that's usually for who goes and gets the Timmies or the pizza for dinner.
That's right.
Usually it's down to construction,
Right.
or we'll have a piece of equipment unserviceable. We may have lost an ILS, or the ILS is out of service for X amount of time, and so they would. Most carriers like to take the most precision approach available, so they would rather the ILS, and that'll be why we land on 23 versus 24 right.
But if
It's all
everything
the,
gets up and running, it's usually back to landing on.
yeah, and the reason being, again, it goes back to why one of you guys asked, why do we send departures to a different runway sometimes? Like the less we can do of that and have everybody depart off the same runway, so that means give them the longest runway available.
Yeah.
So we go. That's why we depart 05 a lot of the time. People hate it because it's a long. It's actually not that much longer a taxi when you calculate it. I think there's a 2-minute delta in the taxi time that we, stats wise, that we figured out from pushing back at Terminal 1, taxiing a 6 left, waiting in the lineup versus taxiing a 5, where there's typically less of a lineup because it's a long taxi and everybody just keeps going like a conveyor belt. So yeah, that'll be why we use it.
I mean, there's the reasons for everything. The reasons why I'm at departures more than I'm at arrivals lately, and it often has to do with the wind and being unpredictable. It's like if the wind changes and I'm over at 2-4 left arrivals, all of a sudden they're landing on 6 right. I can't see anything, so it's safer to be at departures. At least you have them taxiing and then taking off away from you, or taking off over your head. So it's sort of it's not my favorite place to be all the time, but at least it's consistent. I think sometimes across all different, things, we do the thing that is going to make it the easiest in the long run.
And it changes throughout the day, and it also changes depending on who's in the tower running the show.
Right.
So you can get somebody who likes to chase the wind around and makes life very hard for the controllers, because we change ends like 2 or 3 times in a shift. Or we kind of suck up a little bit of a tailwind because we know it's predominantly going to go back the other way. But we have some questionable winds here because of the lake effect.
Yeah.
So we can often have a south wind at the south wind and a north wind on the north side of the field. So we can have opposing winds like this. Certainly in the summer, you'll see that quite a lot. And it's kind of hard so you'll have a headwind. So if it's 360 at 10 on the north and it's 160 at 8 on the south, which runway do you pick? And nobody said yeah, exactly. It's you kind of
land them on the 427. Call it.
There you go. Yeah, exactly. But that is why, I don't know if any of you remember, Emirates had a 777 crash in Dubai when I was there, 2016. It crashed on a go around because they didn't apply power properly. They didn't fly the go around very well, but one of the factors was there was a 20 knot wind on either end of the runway. So it was the land breeze and the sea breeze fighting against each other, and we only had the parallel runways, nowhere to go.
Wow.
And so yeah, they got a wind shear and they had long landing, which is expected. And I believe for whatever reason they didn't fly the go around properly. And yeah.
That is it's one place I want to visit once, just to see multiple A380s at the same time.
There's a lot of it's a lot easier with 380s in Dubai than it is here.
Dave asked, when high-profile incidents occur elsewhere in the world, example Haneda recently, does your team hold a debrief on how to avoid similar occurrences at YYZ?
We don't debrief on them per se. They're definitely high up on the list of things we talk about in the tower, and we have. It's interesting to see the Haneda incident. Horrific.
Yeah.
And
very tragic.
I don't know how you recover from that as a controller. I hope never to be involved in anything like that, but to miss that kind of, it's like the Metroliner in LAX donkeys years ago.
Yeah.
Like the fact that we're having the same incident is kind of concerning in terms of safety things that are put in place. We have like I referred to the rimcast earlier, we would have alarms blaring at us when two targets are too close to each other. So we have, for that similar scenario, we have things in place in Toronto that would definitely give us chance to react to that situation. We have obviously annual refresher training, annual competence training, and competency checks, and the similar things to pilots. We're put through our paces a little bit. Depends which company you work for, which country you work for, depends how hard they hit that. Some are more diligent at it than others. But yeah, every year we go through some scenarios, human factors, all that stuff that leads to an incident, and what do we have in place? What do you have in place in your own toolkit, etc., etc. At the end of the day, the equipment is always there to let you down. Like there's nothing better than the eyeball.
Yeah.
If you're looking, equipment can fail, and it does.
That's my thought too about things like AI and self-driving cars, and I'm sure there's talk in the world about replacing pilots and air traffic controllers with advanced computers. But at the end of the day, you get into those ethical questions of if the car has to swerve to avoid a group, but at the same time would swerve into the child. How does it make those decisions? And is there an option that you might not consider because you're programmed these? I don't know enough about AI to comment too much about that. But,
I think that's how it would start for sure, but it would have to learn. That's the thing. There's so many ways to get out of a situation. You just have to be ready for it.
Yeah.
That's what we're always taught. That's what you train. Is like if I'm sitting in a position with a trainee, I'm like, okay, what happened? What are you going to do if? And I'll throw scenarios. I'll be like, what if this guy stops on the runway? What heading? Because we interact with Billy Bishop a lot as well.
Yeah.
So depending on what approaches they're flying restricts what turns and headings we can give. So sometimes our worst scenario is IMC, which is instrument meteorological conditions. So 1,000-foot ceiling, 3-mile visibility, anything less than that. And Billy Bishop's doing approaches onto the 08 because of the way the lake's working. We have no turn to the south. We have no headings we can use when there's an aircraft on approach there. So we have to be very careful and always have some other options.
It's a complex airspace.
Yeah. And then we have Brampton, for whatever reason, wants to do IFR departures and arrivals. But yeah.
Once in a blue moon, I see a Cessna 172 ask for permission to fly south of or west of the thresholds or something, and that's something that I would have loved to do during my training. But I imagine that's not a very common occurrence.
It's common that they ask.
Right.
They'll come out of the city center. They'll be doing a tour or whatever, and they'll want to come overhead to go back to Brampton or wherever they're going. It very much depends on the controller in position, what their traffic is, if they're comfortable. I denied one the other day. I was just simply too busy. It's the last thing I want is to put a Cessna 2,000 feet over the landing threshold, and then I miss number one going around at a mile final, and that's basically right in his way.
Yeah,
I don't need it. I don't get paid enough to do that.
No, for sure. Brittany wants to know, I think we kind of touched on this a little bit. Why is Korean Air, she seems to notice, does a lot of 3-3 takeoffs. Is there something specific about Korean Air, or is it down to, once again, it's a heavy Dreamliner and it needs a lot of runway and probably performs better in that configuration when the wind is such?
It'll be sometimes we're running a slight tailwind on the twos, and they can't take it. Like we're waiting for the wind to back around again, kind of thing. So we won't, like the other day. When was I last working? Monday evening, I'm on an R and as where to go. We were on the twos, but the wind was 360 at 10. Then it went to 010, and then it came back to 320. And I'm like, there's nowhere good to go here. Bye, Emil. Thanks for staying, dude. I see that in the chat. So it's some people hang on to the wind, and then some planes can't take it. So we had a little stretch of it where a lot of planes landed on 23 with the tailwind because they couldn't take the tailwind on 24 right because of the shorter runway. Same thing applies on departure. Korean, who else? Air India likes it a lot. Some of the Air Canada flights, certainly Cathay and Eva in the evening. They like 33 right, and it is to do with weight and aircraft performance.
Right.
It's not just Toronto. It's the same thing. In the Middle East, it was we got to be airborne by 10 a.m. or before it hits 41 degrees. Otherwise, they're offloading freight or self-loading freight.
That's one of the things I learned in ground school and through my own training is that you want nice cold dry air.
Yep. Yeah, you don't get that in the middle of the desert in the summer.
No, I'll bet.
Yeah.
Although I was just in the desert and thought it would be warm. We drove to the Grand Canyon last week from Las Vegas, and it was about 1 degree and snowing. So
Nice.
it was kind of cool, actually. It was neat. I guess a couple of final questions. One of the things a couple personal curious question is, what is your favorite position in that tower? Is it ground clearance or is it tower?
Ground.
Ground, yeah.
Ground wherever I've been. Ground is like, and I'll tell this to every trainee, there is no one way to do it. We all have specific taxiways. Everybody goes Alpha Hotel or Bravo Charlie or the really ludicrous Sierra Echo Golf Hotel across 3-3 right, 3-3 left to get out to 5. But there's a million ways to solve the problem. I'm one of these people that doesn't like any airplane to come to a stop. And so I'll go out of my way to become creative and keep moving. I'll go from Sierra to Romeo to November, back down to Romeo. I'll mix it and move it around. It's like one of those puzzles when you were a kid. We had the tile that you got to keep moving them all around to try and get the picture you want. It changes every day. It's just one big. The busier, the better. The more chaotic, the better for me. Tower is very linear. It's great fun, but I'm limited with what I can play with. Ground, I get to play and make my own puzzle. Sometimes I get myself in a puzzle, and then it's fun trying to dig your way out of it. But
that's fair. That is fair. I think we can all relate in our own lines of work. I was just noticing my father-in-law in the call, and I guess his name's also Mike. Pearson has changed quite a bit since you were a kid, I imagine. Yeah.
Oh, late 1950s. I went to the airport where we stood on top of the tower to watch my aunt and uncle leave for England and watch them walk out of the terminal and climb up the steps into the airplane. So that was my first experience at Pearson. And
it wasn't called Pearson at the time, though, right?
It was called Malton at the time.
Malton.
And I grew up in Etobicoke, and we always had the planes flying north-south over top of us. So I kind of understand the comments about the noise. Of course, when I was we're going back 50, 60 years now, there were a lot fewer planes and they weren't as noisy.
I thought they would be noisier. There you go. What do I know?
I guess propellers are noisier, but when you have a tiny propeller versus a giant, GE90, I guess they're I appreciate that. I had my friend's coming in a little bit late, but he'll check in anyways. I guess what was I going to ask? Oh yeah, what I noted that I found really interesting was when Mandy and I got to visit the tower. So I don't know what we expected in that room, but it was not. Wasn't what we. No, it was more. I have this image of the air traffic control tower being this environment where everybody is in this hyper focused. Like I'm thinking like the old movies of the New York Stock Exchange or like this intense call center. But I just found the ability of the people working there to be able to like switch from. So my wife and I was talking the other day. Oh, Air Canada 2 exited Delta 4 content. And just it did not seem like a high stress environment, but I imagine that comes from like really professional intensity and comfort with what you're doing. But I found that surprising. I don't know if there's a question in there, but
everybody finds that surprising. It's also the same the world over. Well, probably not surprised actually. It's the same circus, different tent, I call it. Same clowns are up in the tower.
Right.
But it's somebody asked this earlier on, I think, in the chat about it being, is it as intense as pushing 10 in terms of the stress? No,
Sorry.
it's not. Not in such long durations. There are moments where it's, and you'll notice it. Like everybody in the tower will go quiet. Like when there's time to hold a conversation in between transmissions and doing things, it happens. It kind of lightens the atmosphere. If everybody's like deadpan facing the front, looking out of the window all the time, like it gets a little too intense. Like but there are moments like that. So you're in a snow event, you're doing snow clear, and you can't see a damn thing out the window. There's planes everywhere. There's guys sliding off taxiways. Like everybody is like hyper vigilant.
Yeah.
When it's just ticket, and it's the same as pilots. We're not paid for 80% of the job. We're paid for that 20% where it goes, wheels fall off.
Yeah.
You're scrambling to figure out where to put these airplanes when we've got summer storms coming through and we're weather avoiding, and everybody wants a heading, and then you run out of headings and you got nowhere to go with your overshoot, and you're just constantly juggling balls. So a pilot is the same 80% of the time. They're tickety boo, and then 20% it's hanging on by your fingernails.
I think my friend Vio, who flies Embraers, said when someone had made a comment about the sterile cockpit rule, and a pilot waved at me once, and they went off about that I'm fine. Anyways, we always have some fun in the streams, but he was like, it's like driving a car sometimes. There's a time when you can listen to the radio and sing along, and there's a time when you turn it off and you sit upright and you look direct ahead because the conditions call for it. And my dad was a police officer for 30 years, and he said similarly about that job. He said it's like the job is 99% the most boring time of your life and 1% the most terrifying. So it's
yeah, it's not, I wouldn't say ours is the most boring, but when you look at statistics, we tend to have more incidents when we're not working so hard. So it's that whole bell curve of the stress performance.
Yeah.
If we're not stimulated enough, humans just don't pay attention. We just don't. It's not a traffic controllers, it's everybody. We get bored, we zone out, we think about something else. The thing is, we try not to have too many distractions in the tower. So obviously you can't be on your cell phone in the tower. You can't blah blah blah. It's
no bachelor parties, I guess.
No, you try to mitigate it as best you can, but you are a licensed person, so you have to, you got to uphold the responsibilities of that license and do your best to make sure you're not losing attention or falling asleep in the cockpit. Same scenario.
Fair. Brittany has a hand up, so speak.
Also a question in the chat.
I was wondering, lately when I've been out, I've noticed, I mean, like, it's not an obviously like everyday thing, but I have noticed between the summer and now that there's been a lot more calls on ATC from the pilots reporting drones in the area. How often do you guys deal with that kind of stuff, and is there a way to kind of combat it, or you kind of just have to relay what the pilot's telling you what they see?
I would add on to that lasers as well. I hear that a few times too, like more in LA.
Yeah.
But
Oh, we've had quite a few lasers recently, yeah. I'm going to answer your other question, Brittany, in a second as well. It's in the chat. But the drones is an inevitable thing in our future. They will be at the airport. They will be everywhere. We have we don't have a lot of procedures in place. That part of the CARS, the civil aviation regulations, is that the drone pilot is solely responsible from separating themselves from manned aircraft. So they're supposed to keep it. We're supposed to know about it. So they go through a system called nav drone where they will log their flight that they're doing. If it's a random person that's just thrown the drone up, then we won't know about it, and we'll rely on a pilot report. That then gets with an estimate of where and when and what height will get reported via our shift manager to the police. Police are dispatched to a rough location. Obviously, if you're not there in 20 minutes, the guy's run out of battery and he's on the ground somewhere anyway. You'll never find him. But we do have the wildlife guys at the airport. They fly drones all the time. They fly fixed wings that look like falcons to scare the birds. They also fly Mavics and the bigger stuff up to M300s Lots and lots more. We even have Sky Service South, the FBO down there, which is brutally placed on the south side of an active runway. Has its issues of its own, but they are starting a drone service to hospital in downtown where they'll transport live organs, etc., etc. So they're currently testing flight of that from the land side by Convair.
Yeah, because I think it
And
was
launching
like
drones.
3 weeks ago or 4 now that we were watching arrivals, and one of the WestJet pilots reported that a drone went under his right or left wing. So
Yeah, nobody should be. We vet every drone request. So every drone request we get will. So if it was a legitimate approved request, it would come in with an altitude, all the licensing and certification for the pilot, where they want to be, how long they want to be there, and then we would put requirements on that. So we would cap them at a lower altitude if we thought they were going to get too close to airplanes, etc. There you go. So if you don't have DJI unlock for whatever they call it, the geo fencing for airports, it won't even get airborne near an airport. But obviously a lot of people do, and there's obviously ways around it. The one thing that there's no way around is that drones are our future somehow, somewhere. Everybody will be getting Amazon packages via drones, probably.
It's like AI in education. Every essay is going to be
Yep.
an AI now.
Yep. Back to Brittany's other question. Sorry, before we carry on. Running crossing runways depends on which runways we're doing. What makes it easier or harder? The two most common we do is land 15 left, depart 23. So the thresholds of those two are really close, which makes it really easy to do. Because you can run a departure out in every arrival hole. The hardest one to do is landing on 05, departing 33 right, which the airport like us to use as a night noise preferential set. If you can imagine the distance between the intersection of touching down on 05 and the intersection of 33 right is a long way.
Yeah.
So trying to judge that distance to safely, and we're not looking to get the guy through the intersection by the guy touches down. What I'm looking at getting is if my arrival on 05 goes around, I will have wake turbulence separation by the time he goes through the intersection of 33 right. So it's not tarmac to tarmac. It's in my other scenario where he aborts the landing. Will I have enough separation?
It's a lot to think about.
I don't like running that operation, and because you're also reliant on the pilot putting the power on when you've told them clear for takeoff, and they don't all do that as quick as each other. So again, we're back to pilot performance.
Right. I don't know if anyone else had any final questions. Oh, Johnny. And then, I always had that selfish question of who do I talk to at Nav Canada to partner to do a stream from the tower? But I know that's it's one of those questions that I will just keep to myself. Go for it, Johnny.
Hey, thanks, Mick, for answering the previous two questions for me. One quick question: say, if I'm flying a little Cessna, how easy, or I should say, how easy for me, say, to fly around the Toronto airspace? If I say just south of 401, if you are using the 24s or 06, if I say if I say south of 401, will you grant that, or no? Because you guys are too busy. Stay off my Class C airspace?
Honestly, it depends. It depends on the time of day. It depends on the traffic scenario at the time, and how busy controllers are. I couldn't say everybody would approve it. Typically, we will use that for the media helicopters. Part of the geographical separation is stay south of the 401, and they'll trickle on down there. That's not to say if you're in airport's airspace on 19.3, you can't ask them to ask us if you can fly through the zone. Sometimes we're quite accommodating, quite nice. Sometimes we're not. We try as best we can. Certainly in COVID, we had a lot of guys flying through and doing low and overs and trying to keep us busy.
Yeah, I actually did once.
There you go. See?
Yeah.
I think my flight instructor was saying that as well. Like during COVID, it was cool to be able to, get a low and over it when there's nothing going on at the airport. The airport
authority did not like that.
I'll bet.
Yeah.
They don't seem to like a lot of things.
No, it's an interesting relationship. Let's put it that way.
I'll bet. I'm curious because how do controllers feel about us weirdo plane spotters who just like hang out and like listen to you on the radio because it's interesting and watch the airplanes? Because I know the GPAA, I'm sure if they had their way, would put much taller fences to keep us out.
It gives us a god complex. No, I'm joking. Absolutely does not do that because you catch all my mistakes on the radio. Then, you know what? It's a mixed bag. Some people are there because they love aviation and therefore they completely understand why you guys do what you do. And then there's other people that are like, why are you wasting your Saturday afternoon sat on the perimeter road of an airport waiting for Emirates to depart or whatever?
Yeah.
You know, it's a very mixed bag. I'm in the former of those. I would sit there all day quite happily and watch planes go by. And that's what I did before I started ATC.
I think there's a lot of us out there that don't always like to admit it because I think some of us are fear that others will think we're weird, and we just got to embrace that because like I do theater as well, and my theater friends are like, "Why do you watch airplanes?" And my airplane friends are like, "Why do you do theater?" Like it's everybody has their thing, right?
Yeah, absolutely, and everybody should be free to have their own thing and enjoy it to the fullest. We get one shot at this thing, right?
Yeah. I had before we go, I had a silly idea of I wonder if we could do a mock me trying to land somewhere and do like a call. If I tried to do pilot calls to air traffic control, and I will fail miserably. But
you want to do what?
No, like imagining I'm calling on the radio as a pilot, and what that would if I would get the calls correct.
Oh man. You probably would.
Let's say I'm all right. Let's just it's more like for my own amusement because I do have my radio certificate, but I'm like, I know this is Cessna 172 Foxtrot Oscar Whiskey over Bowmanville at 3,000. Anyway, so it's a different kind of situation. So I guess the first time I would talk to you would be when I get handed over from arrivals.
My job's very easy if you're coming in for arrivals. I just say clear to land.
All right, so I would just say something like Toronto Tower. This is let's say Cessna 172 Foxtrot Oscar Whiskey at Kirex at 100 knots.
If you're doing 100 knots at Curex, I'm gonna have a problem.
Right. I'm in a Cessna 172, so I'm like, we gotta.
Yeah.
Well, that's
if you,
okay.
If you were doing that, the only time I've ever had somebody fly the ILS like that was at Heathrow. It was horrendous. So it takes so long for you to get down to the ground.
Yeah, that's fair.
So yeah, basically, all the phraseology is call sign station ID, which is Toronto Tower. So you'll always hear us say Toronto Tower on initial contact. After that, it becomes ground or whatever.
Yeah.
So you'd be Oscar Whiskey Toronto Tower, wind 260 at 10, gusting 20. Number 2, following a 320 at a mile final, clear to land 24 left. Keep the speed as long as possible. Emirates 380 with 100 knots catch up on you behind.
All right, check remarks, clear to land. Cessna 172, Oscar Whiskey. I don't think I'd say Cessna again. I would just say Oscar Whiskey probably.
Yeah.
Because if you shorten the call sign, then we're allowed to say it back short. But like that's supposed to come from air traffic control rather than the pilot, if that's correct.
On initial contact, it should be the full thing. I just never do the full thing.
Right.
That's habit and tired of saying phonetic letters.
Yeah.
Yeah. Call signs are much easier.
I'll bet like Air Canada too. It's a lot easier. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's fair.
The only issue you get to with the landing clearance is when you get into brake connection and RVRs and this, that, and the other, and you forget you've said clear to land because your landing clearance is such a long transmission.
Right.
Yeah.
And we hear that a few times too, where a pilot has, confirmed they've read back clear to land, and then a minute later they're like, confirm clear to land for WestJet 416.
Usually that happens if they're number 2 or number 3. Again, it's with the multiple landing clearances; they don't get it all the time, so it's or they've just forgotten to turn the lights on, which is their usual signal that they've been clear to land.
If I recognize we're getting on to overtime now, but if I could ask what because I notice sometimes when we're listening, there are certain controllers, not controllers, but certain situations that cause annoyed responses. And so I guess my question is, what are the things that airlines and pilots do that get that, like, I know one of them is like
Everything.
repeated calls that they don't answer. And I hear sometimes, like, I called you 5 times. Where the heck were you? And what are some of the ones that, because I don't think I've ever heard you be snarky on the radio, but what are the things that make you want to go, seriously?
So that's because I'm English and
Right.
I'm very polite.
Of
and I was
course.
taught to be well mannered.
Keep calm and carry on.
Yeah. No.
My family's English as well. I get it.
Everybody has a different tolerance threshold.
Right.
And if you listen to me enough, you will hear me lose it a few times. And the worst, some of the worst things are not responding to a call.
Right.
So it will be that I've tried you 3 times. Like, and the reason being is what I've probably done is I'm boxing myself in a corner with something, and I need to pass you some information like a giveaway or a whatever. And if you don't read it back, I'm having a deal on the ground and I'm going home because I haven't separated the traffic.
Right.
So one of the big things that we always believe in the tower is the pilot just switches off as soon as they touch down. Like, they just, like, whatever. They don't really pay attention. They're too busy doing, I don't know, whatever their shutdown or their taxi checklist, their after landing checklist. And I get that they're busy. I've been in the flight deck, so I do have empathy. I've been, in fact, I was on a Cathay 747 into Heathrow, coming back, 14 hours flight over Russia. We'd had a low fuel, not a low fuel, low fuel temperature warning because we were over a massive Siberian air mass that was super cold. So we had to speed up and do all kinds of things. So the crew had been busy. We got to Heathrow, coming down onto the approach, and they took a heading for a speed and a speed for a heading, and they did, they took, and it's just pilot fatigue. They're tired, so I have huge empathy for these, not just the long haul guys, but the guys that go out and back 3 or 4 times a day to Ottawa or Montreal or whatever.
That's Vio. He's at LaGuardia, Newark, back and forth all the time.
There you go, and you've seen it all day long, and all you want to do is get home, and all you've done all day is come off 24 right, and then you've taxied Delta cross 33 right, Delta Romeo, and you don't want to listen, and I get it, but yeah, the frustration's almost always caused by them not listening and responding when I want them to respond. Obviously, I want them to respond immediately, and I get, why are you not listening, sort of thing. That's the worst case. The other case is you take a wrong turn. That can put you nose to nose with somebody. And doesn't happen very often, but it happens enough that they'll turn left on Alpha instead of right on Alpha and put you into the nose of BA coming off Alpha Kilo or whatever. And then it's the golden tow bar. Out we come and push planes back to put them in the right direction.
Is there, Seahawk Skills has a question. In the US, there's a pattern that's followed at ATC to Terminal Radar Approach Control to Air Route Traffic Control Center back to ATC. Is it the same pattern followed in Canada? I don't know what half that thing means, but I like it.
In terms of how the flight progresses or in terms of career progression? Yeah, it's very similar. We don't call them Tracons in Canada. Tracon is usually where the terminal and the tower are co-located. Nowadays, all our terminal or our approach facilities are based in the area control centers. So it'll go from the tower. Well, actually, at Toronto, it'll go from the apron management unit. Oh no. Okay, we'll start again. It goes from me in clearance delivery, doing the boring bit of giving the guys flight plan and his score code. Then it'll go to the apron management unit. They manage the flow on and off the gate, pushbacks as an advisory service. Then they come back to us in ground, tower, then they go to departure, and then they'll go to the en route phase. And then it'll be reversed coming back in, obviously.
So you're saying you wouldn't want to work in Oshawa do assessment circuits all day?
Dude, so here's a funny story. I come to Canada after At the time, it was 13 years of ATC. And Transport Canada, as Canada does in its wonderfully mysterious ways, doesn't recognize licenses from overseas. It's not just ATC. It's
the same in education as well.
Education, medical, anything that requires that kind of, they don't recognize it. So what Nav Canada does is they put you through like the basic course that every person off the street does, but they compress it and they just make you do a lot of stuff that you've never done before. And what people don't realize coming to Canada or coming to North America, because we cater to our friends south of the border, which is why in a metric world we use inches of mercury and we use feet and all kinds of weird ways of measuring things that I'm not used to.
Yeah.
So the difference from an ICAO world, ICAO being Montreal based, we all know that, so that's another weird oddity. And a North America world is there's about 85 differences between how we do ATC. So I come over here and it's sort of looks the same. It's like riding with your left hand, and now I'm doing it with my right hand. It looks the same, but to begin with, it's very difficult to figure out what you want me to do. So the rules are slightly different. The way we talk is slightly different. Things that I would get fired for overseas, I can do here. Things that I could get fired for here, I could do overseas. There's a lot of different separation standards, etc. So I come over here and they put me in a simulator and they go, okay, we're going to do VFR circuits with IFR departures and cross runways. I swear they probably thought I'd never controlled an airplane before in my life. I had Cessnas in parts of the circuit I didn't know existed. I didn't know how to get them back. It's just not my wheelhouse anymore. So you get trained into a corner very quickly.
It does.
I'm happy in my corner, I'll be honest.
That's fair.
Yeah. No, I wouldn't want to 8 in the circuit at Oshawa. Not a chance.
I found that interesting when I did a couple lessons when I was out in BC and we flew from YLW, and that was really cool because it was the first time I had to give way to a 737 on the taxiway, and I found that. And then at some point they have to be like, we're shutting down circuits because there's just too much going on. And so I had a guy who was going to do his first solo right after my lesson, and he just had to cancel because the IFR traffic got too busy, and I can't. It's got to have its own nightmares for sure.
And the IFR traffic swap pays the bills. We must remember this.
Absolutely, yeah.
Unfortunately, that's the nitty gritty of it. Johnny, sorry, you have a question. If I have a loss of separation, have I ever had a loss of separation? Yes, I have. I think we all have in our careers at some point. Separation is there so that when we lose it, we can get it back before it becomes an issue. So there are safe boundaries in place. We do go home, so we end up filling in a lot of paperwork. It goes through a whole investigation process. So with no punitive action, a controller is relieved from duty. The real reason for this is, and you'll see it with trainees all the time, is that if you have some kind of loss of separation or you've made a mistake, typically you dwell on the mistake. And what the company doesn't want you to do is go on and have another event happen because you're too busy kicking yourself or thinking about what if I'd done it this way. You have that whole retroactive replaying of the incident. So we get you out of position, sort yourself out. We do some paperwork, take statements, and it's all about learning. It's all about how the equipment was set up, what the operation was. Give you a statement to the best of your ability. It all gets investigated by the head office. And you come back to work with a confidence check. Someone sits with you, make sure you're not still dwelling on issues and that you're confident to go back to work. And then that's kind of how it plays out. But it's there to protect the controller and the integrity of the operation. Because I had a trainee this week. They tried to drive 2 planes together on the ground. You know, as everybody does, they just forgot to separate it. And I'm like, you got to go and do that. And then they dwelled on it, and then they tried to do it again. And I'm like, okay, you need to just take a step back, reset, and then come back into this. Like, mistakes happen. That's why I'm there as the instructor, is to catch them when they fall and fix it and make sure it doesn't end up in a loss of separation. And they learn from that. But if they don't allow themselves to forgive and move on and try and do it better, you can end up just compounding the issue. So,
I feel like that's good life advice, Mick.
oh, there you go.
Not just in air traffic control, but in
That
general.
was for free.
There you go. Well, unless anyone has any final pressing questions, I don't want to keep Mick all night. But thank you so much for doing this. It's I've learned a lot, and I hope everyone who is in the call has learned things. We got some clapping there from Johnny. Thanks, Dave. Really appreciate that. And hopefully this is not the last time. Maybe maybe in the summer afterwards, if we have another time to come back and chat again, because I think honestly, I'm sure people will think of questions right after the meeting is done. Like, I should have asked about I don't know, why Porter is what it is. Oh, I did have a question. Does Porter's call sign changed for their Dash 8s? We heard it. Did they go Dashport or something?
Yeah. Don't go there. Yeah, it's basically because they're now under 2 separate operating certificates.
Oh, okay. So it's kind of like 2 airlines.
Yeah, they have to have different call signs. They wanted to go what the heck? Dashport. No, Porter Dash and Porter Jet was what they originally wanted to do. And we turned around and went, it's not happening. Do something different. So they ended up with Dashport, and they got different 3 letters as well on their call sign. So
interesting.
It's PTC and PTR instead now, or something like that.
That must be like just an airline thing. They're trying to separate their operations.
Yeah, I don't know. There's some other airlines have done that in the past, but this is it's purely because they're operating under 2 air operator certificates.
Oh,
2 separate
interesting.
ones. Yeah.
Cool. That was a bonus question there.
Yeah.
We had it's a clarification on the when a plane is tracked in the U.S. or the progression of the flight is passed from different towers. When an airplane departs, it's passed from ATC to the terminal radar approach control. Fully en route, it's passed from the controllers to the ARTCC. When the plane is slowing down, it's backed. Oh, I see what you're saying. It looks similar like when I followed it around too. Like, it goes from tower to departure to en route, and then when it gets somewhere else through the different FIRs, it gets to the approach at the other airport, and then the tower, and then the ground. Like, it kind of has that kind of like outward pass off to the en route people, and then back in to the more focused.
Yeah. And you can have lots of en route segments. The airspace is very split up based on how much a controller can actually look after, which is usually no more than probably 10 to 15 airplanes at a time.
Right.
In a busy environment. It's a lot of ducks to keep in a row.
And different if you're working on the VATSIM.
Yeah.
I remember what you were doing. I was watching one of your streams, and you were giving takeoff clearances in North Bay as well as like all over the place. So.
Yeah, the VATSIM world's very different. I do still play it. I don't stream anymore. Unfortunately, I kind of ran out of time to do that in the day.
Right.
But I used to. As you can see, the sign is still on the wall. But it's VATSIM's a great way to get into the hobby, though, to figure it out and learn. It's like people look down their noses at it in my world and think that they're a bunch of loons that think they know better than we do, and some of them do think they know more than we do, and that's their prerogative, and they're entitled to opinion. We have 40 controllers at Pearson, and we have 45 opinions on most things, so everyone's entitled to an opinion. But that's where I started before I started with Nats. Is I was on VATSIM and I was learning the kind of the ropes as basic as I could, and then off we went and did it for real. And I've loved every minute.
That's amazing. Do you recommend a career in air traffic control?
100%.
Awesome. And if somebody wants to get started, where's a good first step?
I can't remember the website. I'm a terrible advertiser for Nav Canada.
Whatever.
No, there's something. Hang on. I'm going to find it while you're still here. I don't know who's interested. We don't age discriminate either in Canada, so everybody's welcome. Where are we? Careers. Yeah, there is a certain funky website. I wish I knew what it was. No. Never mind. I'm rubbish. I can't find it. Go to navcanada.ca and link through there.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Mick. Really, really appreciate it. And hopefully in a upcoming stream, we'll hear you on the radio, so we can all judge all your mistakes.
It's fine, and there will be many of them.
Hey, I mean, those who don't make mistakes, I don't think they exist. I think that's what
No.
makes us human, right?
No.
And we learn from everything we do. So I've learned so much, and I just want to thank you so much.
No problem. Thanks for having me. And yeah, if you ever need me back, and you get a ton of questions that you need answers to, just let me know, and we'll do this again.
Sounds good. Appreciate it.
Alrighty.
All right. Have a great night, everybody. Embrace the journey.